The inflation tragedy of the Roman Empire, the 1000% destruction of the denarius from silver to copper. You know, many people think the great Roman Empire collapsed because of barbarian invasions, but, that's not the real story. Rome unknowingly destroyed itself with inflation. Slowly, silently, almost like a disease. Within just 200 years, the Roman denarius lost 95% of its silver content. And, imagine that. The coin that once shined like the sun became as cheap and worthless as ordinary copper. Soldiers refused their salaries, merchants lost. Trust and the entire economy, well, it just collapsed. The empire, which had ruled half the known world, was eventually divided into two fragile pieces. This is the story of how one of the greatest civilizations in human history destroyed itself simply by printing money. It's also a lesson, about how inflation melts not only wealth, but the spirit of an entire nation. To really feel this tragedy, we must first remember how powerful Rome once was. The year was 64, and Emperor Nero sat on the throne, confident and untouchable. Rome was the center of the world. 50 million people lived under Roman law. The empire stretched from rainy Britain to the deserts of Egypt, from Spain to far Mesopotamia. And the heart of this giant body was beating because it had one trusted currency, the denarius. The denarius was not just a coin, it was the trust system of an entire era. Almost. Like a sacred promise. Every single denarius contained 4.5 grams of pure shining silver. A Roman legionary earned 225 denarii per month, not a small amount for that time. With this money, he could buy bread, wine, olives, anything anywhere in Rome. Everyone knew one simple truth. Denarius was silver, and silver was valuable. End of discussion. The empire was built on this belief, on this invisible agreement between state and people. Taxes were collected in denarius, soldiers were paid in denarius, merchants traded in denarius. It was very much like the American dollar of today, a symbol of stability. But in the year 64, everything suddenly changed. Rome burned in a nightmare of flames. The Great Fire lasted 6 long days. Smoke covered the sky. People screamed in the streets. 70% of the city turned to ashes, and hundreds of thousands became homeless. Nero had to rebuild the city, the temples, the roads, the aqueducts, almost from zero. Yet there was a big problem, maybe the biggest of all. The treasury had no money left. Nero faced two choices: raise taxes or cut spending, both political suicide. Citizens could not pay more taxes. They were already exhausted and angry. Soldiers would not accept lower salaries. They carried the swords after all. So Nero found a third way, the most dangerous financial drug of the ancient world: devaluation. He ordered the mints to reduce the silver content by 10%, just a little change. He thought, instead of pure silver coins, they would make 90% silver and 10% copper. With the same amount of metal, they could print more. Coins, clever on paper. His logic seemed simple and beautiful. More money without more silver. The treasury would look richer. Rome would be rebuilt, and nobody would notice. What a wonderful illusion. Almost too good to be true, but someone did notice, and those were the soldiers, holding the empire together. Roman legionaries felt the coins were lighter in their hands. Something was wrong. They even bit them and tasted copper. Yet they had no power to refuse. They were forced to accept it, swallowing their anger like bitter wine. At first, Nero's devaluation worked. The city was rebuilt, and no revolt happened. This became a very dangerous lesson for future emperors, a shortcut to easy wealth. They learned that devaluation looked like free money, a magical solution. In the next 100 years, every emperor used the same method again and again. Trajan fought expensive wars and reduced the denarius to 85% silver. Marcus Aurelius lowered it to 75 during 20 years of endless battles. Septimius Severus raised soldiers' pay but cut silver to 50%, half copper. Here, exactly here, the system began to collapse like a house with rotten foundations. People were not stupid. Merchants saw the coins were no longer real silver. So they did the only logical thing. They raised prices higher and higher. In the year 200, bread was maybe 2 denarius, nothing serious. By 250 it became 8, and by 260 it reached 20. Prices were exploding. The system was slowly dying in front of everyone. Soldiers suffered the most. They still received 225 denarius. But that salary bought almost nothing. Money had died in their pockets. They felt betrayed by the state they had sworn to protect. Finally, in 235, the ropes snapped, and chaos began. Between 235 and 284, Rome saw 50 emperors, can you imagine? Most of them were killed by their own soldiers, power changing, like the wind. This period is called the Military Anarchy, but honestly, its real name should be economic disaster. When Emperor Gallian came to power, the treasury was completely bankrupt, borders were collapsing, no money remained to pay the legions guarding the frontiers. And, well, he did what everyone before him had done, more devaluation. Now the denarius was only 5% silver, 95% copper. Think about that. It was no longer a real coin, just a metal token pretending to be money. Soldiers scraped the thin silver layer with their knives and finally saw the truth. The symbol of Rome had become a lie in their hands. The economy almost stopped breathing, like a wounded animal. Merchants refused the denarius. Farmers refused taxes. Trust simply disappeared. People returned to barter, like in the Stone Age, trading wheat for shoes. Can you imagine the greatest economy of the world going backwards in time? Then came Diocletian in 284, a strong man with strong ideas. He believed discipline could defeat economic reality. He created a new pure silver coin called the argentius, shiny and proud, and he introduced price controls, trying to freeze the storm. In 301, he declared maximum prices for everything. Those who broke the rule would face death. That was his solution. But it failed. Markets emptied. Fear replaced trade. Black markets grew like weeds between the stones. Reality defeated ideology, as it always does, slowly and mercilessly. Diocletian then divided the empire into East and West. And this, whether he knew it or not, was signing Rome's death sentence, because the collapse of the denarius was the collapse of Rome itself. In 330, Constantine built a new capital, Constantinople. The West was already an empty shell, a body without blood. In 476, the last emperor was removed from his throne. Historians call this the fall of Rome, a clean date in textbooks. But we now know, the real fall began 200 years earlier. It began with the first innocent-looking devaluation. Barbarians did not destroy Rome. Rome invited them through weakness, because it had no real money, no real army, no real economy. Rome was killed not by swords, but by inflation, silent and patient. That is the uncomfortable truth many prefer to forget. Today money is digital, but the lesson is exactly the same. Since 1971, the US dollar lost 98% of its value. Euro, yen, lira, different names, the same road, the same end. Governments print money like Rome once did. They melt wealth silently, without fire, without smoke. The biggest lesson of history is painfully clear. You cannot become rich by printing money. You only delay collapse. Money is the blood of a nation, and poisoned blood kills the state. And, well, look around. The mechanism of the debt trap has not changed. Only the actors and the flags are different. Sri Lanka leased Hambantota port. for 99 years because it could not pay. Pakistan, Kenya, Zambia, they all face similar chains. The IMF and the World Bank feel like modern versions of ancient conquerors. A loan is given, but freedom is slowly taken away. The lesson of the Ottoman debt trap is also clear and heavy. Financial dependence becomes the silent death of political independence. The Ottomans believed they could modernize with imported money. They thought greatness could be bought on credit. But every loan was a bond, and every bond was a chain around the future. The English and French did not need cannons to conquer Istanbul. They simply waited for compound interest to do its patient work. The most effective way to destroy an empire is not to attack it. It is to lend it money it cannot repay. Such a quiet weapon. Europe's sick man did not die of old age. He was foreclosed on. The lesson left behind was written in red ink across history. Sovereignty is not just a flag and a border. It is the ability to pay your own way in the world. If you do not own your debt will own you. And so, here we are, standing in the shadow of Rome, listening to an old story that feels uncomfortably modern. I am Mapemperor. This is the Imperial Economy channel. Subscribe because history repeats, and you must be among those who